Anyone who's watched a few of my podcasts will know that I love Dartmoor's woodlands, a fact attested to by the number of videos taking place in and around Lustley Cleeve. Sure, I love the barren hills and wind-carved tours of the open moors too. Who doesn't love those sweeping romantic vistas? But the forests are where I belong. They are quiet and remote, and there's so much hidden away here for someone who's willing to look behind the bewildering green curtain. Then an odd thing happened. In the last couple of years, I started to hear my lovely woodland hideaways referred to as rainforests. Rainforests, I scoffed. Since when have my woods been rainforests? My first thought was that this was a clever bit of environmentalist marketing by the rewilding clan. Rainforest is an evocative word, emotively charged. Save the rainforests. They're destroying the rainforest. Yanomamo. But was I just being a cynical grump? Was there something in this rebranding of our humble little woodlands into grandiose rainforests? And would finding out be a good excuse to go and mooch about among the ferns for a couple of days? Join me on a jungle adventure. Welcome back to the Dartmoor podcast. On a high summer's day, I packed my bags for a few days of exploring the green cathedral of Lustley Cleeve and the surrounding forests. The woodlands of East Dartmoor are absolutely among my favourite places in the world. And looking on it with an open mind and a fresh perspective, I really could see it as a rainforest. I mean, yes, it's a forest and it rained, but there's more to it than that. Dense foliage burst from the earth with a verdant fecundity, waist-high ferns swamped the forest floor, ivy crept around the vast trunks of the veteran oaks, and the whole place was humming with insects. There were even creeper-covered ruins reminiscent of some Mayan temple being reclaimed by nature. There you go, a couple of tropical bird sounds and you'd think I was in Borneo. Why had my initial reaction to this being a rainforest been one of ridicule? To dispel any doubts I had left, I'd bought this. The Lost Rainforests of Britain by Guy Shrubsole, the book which started all this rainforest malarkey in the first place, and which I'd excitedly been waiting to come out in paperback so I could read it out in the woods. The book is a description of Shrubsole's journey in uncovering these rare and underappreciated habitats around Britain, and making the case for them being rainforests. It's really well written and does a great job of finding synonyms for the word festooned. I think he only says festooned once, and that shows incredible restraint. And now I've wasted my festooned talking about his festooned. Damn it. Now, Guy was a bit too famous to come on the pod, but hey, he's a busy bloke, and I've seen him on proper telly and everything. Through this book, he spread awareness of these amazing habitats, putting them into the public consciousness and ensuring their protection. It's a wonderful achievement. And thanks to a bit of nominative determinism, I can't help but think he was destined to do this. After all, his name literally means man with the central essence of a small tree. Anyway, my first qualm with my Dartmoor forests being called rainforests was, I suppose, that when I think of the word rainforest, my mind immediately equated it with the word tropical, a word which is completely antithetical to Dartmoor. And this is the first place where Shrubsole put me straight. You see, as well as the well-publicised tropical rainforests like the Amazon and the Congo, the cooler areas of the Northern Hemisphere have their own more subtle, temperate rainforests. It would seem then that sweltering equatorial heat isn't a requisite of a rainforest, but climate is important. Temperate rainforests can only thrive in oceanic climates, one where there's a lot of rainfall and the temperature is somewhat, well, temperate, never really reaching any extremes. Part of the reason temperate rainforest takes up such a tiny percent of land area in Britain, less than 1%, is that it's such a fussy place, needing about 2 metres of rainfall a year, ideally spread over an average of 200 days, and with the temperature pretty much staying above freezing and below 20 degrees. On the Lost Rainforests of Britain website, you can find a link to an intriguing map which highlights the areas of Britain with an oceanic climate which could sustain rainforests. And you can play with the layers to show whether tiny fragments of this habitat still exist, highlighting just how much we have lost over the ages and just how much potential there is for expansion. And as you can see, Dartmoor's climate is just about perfect. The Gulf Stream brings a steady and constant flow of moist, warm-ish air in from out across the Atlantic and then dumps buckets of rain on the high land of the moor. This, combined with remote, steep valleys like those of the Dart, Tean, Erm and Bovey, creates a perfect environment for these forests to thrive. And once trees have a hold, they multiply this temperate effect, sheltering the forest floor from the worst of the sun in the summer and holding in a little extra warmth in the winter. There you have it. As if Dartmoor needed another reason to be special, it is one of the few places in the world capable of supporting a temperate rainforest. But what's the result? We've looked at the climatic conditions needed to create a rainforest, the causes, but what are the symptoms? What identifies a woodland as one of these rare and magical places? The answer lies in the flora. Temperate rainforests support an array of ferns, mosses, lichens and liverworts, primitive plants which grow on the branches and trunks of trees, absorbing moisture from the damp air rather than using a root system. As a group, these are called epiphytes. Now, I'm no botanist, or indeed a bryologist or a pteridologist, but I'm not going to pass up the chance to learn something new. Here are some of the indicator species of the temperate rainforest I found in my romp around Lustley Cleeve. First, and most obvious, are the ferns. At this time of year, tall, damp and swarming with ticks. Yes, this little adventure, although fascinating, was a bit of a war with the insects. These little dots on the underside of ferns' leaves, though, aren't insect eggs as I had foolishly assumed, but actually the plant's method of reproduction. What differentiates ferns from other plants is that they don't have seeds but produce spores much like a fungus. There are literally thousands of different species of fern, but the types that are most indicative of a rainforest environment are the polypody ferns like these chaps, and if your ferns are epiphytic, then you're really in jungle territory. Bashkat. Then there are the mosses and liverworts, spongy green stuff. If you're willing to look closely, there's quite a beautiful mix of shapes and colours going on here. Lichens are even weirder, a strange mixture of algae and plant that work together to photosynthesize and grow high among the branches. They have some pretty cool names too, like string of sausages, witch's whiskers and old man's beard. Beautiful stuff all round, but quite a hostile environment for humans. I had to endure a good deal of sweaty humidity, slips and trips, and numerous insect bites while filming it. Oh, and of course a few run-ins with the naughty ponies. Clever girl. Anyway, it follows that if this is such a scarce and wonderful habitat, providing a home for such an astonishing collection of rare bryophytes, then it needs to be protected. Or better still, expanded. Now, as I discussed in my recent Farmers versus Environmentalists episode, I'm not one of those who wants to see the whole of Dartmoor covered in trees. I think that's as unachievable as it is undesirable. To have true biodiversity, we need a combination of bogs, moorland, meadows, ross pastures and forests. But the rainforest is underrepresented, I think, at present. One of the main things that made me scoff at the idea of Dartmoor having a rainforest in the first place was scale. Rainforests in my mind are vast, areas of vegetation so huge that they produce their own weather systems, whereas Dartmoor's rainforests are embarrassingly small. Think of the iconic Wistman's Wood, for example. It's only about 8 acres in size. Lusty Cleave is actually a great example that we can expand these areas. I recently saw an aerial photo of Lusty Cleave from 1946 that shows it as basically being farmland. So if you just leave stuff alone, then all this can spring up in less than a century. And there's some hope that this is happening. Recently, Prince William, who effectively owns Wistman's Wood, has pledged to support his expansion by reducing grazing on its fringes. More good work from Guy Shrubsole. And as we're back to talking about Guy, he recently tweeted a map showing what would happen if we let these rainforests expand by just 150 metres in every direction. We'd end up with a 27% forest coverage on Dartmoor rather than 7%, which, perhaps most importantly, would allow many of these patches of woodland to connect up. It's an appealing idea. Horror has a face, and you must make a friend of horror. Horror and mortal terror are your friends. If not... Shush! My jungle journey has been one from sceptic to true believer. Yes, rainforest is a rather emotive term, but maybe that's exactly what we need to raise a bit of awareness about these amazing habitats. And at the end of my adventure, I feel like I've gained a little new knowledge, a lot of new tick bites, and a surprising new perspective on a place that I've spent so much time in. I'm surprised I don't have epiphytes of my own. Oh, and before you go, I'd love to know how many of my daft jungle film references you got. I hope you enjoyed watching, everyone. See you next time.